The gunshot, echoing across the dusty main street of Redemption Creek, silenced every saloon piano and hushed every whispered conversation for a breathless moment in the summer of 1879. Virginia Kane stood frozen on the wooden boardwalk, her heart pounding as she watched the notorious Blackwell Gang ride away, leaving behind another victim in their ruthless quest for vengeance against anyone connected to her father's silver mine. Virginia had returned to this frontier town merely 3 weeks ago after 8 years at a finishing school in Boston, only to find her father's mining empire threatened and the town living in fear. The locals called it the Blackwell curse. Anyone who worked for Jacob Kane seemed marked for an early grave. "Miss Kane, you should not be out here," Sheriff Tompkins urged, his weathered face creased with concern as he guided her away from the growing crowd. "Your father would have my badge if he knew." "Who was it this time?" Virginia asked, her voice barely steady. "Young Peterson worked as a payroll clerk at the mine." The sheriff shook his head. "Third man this month." Virginia closed her eyes briefly, feeling the weight of guilt settle over her shoulders. Her father lay bedridden after a stroke, leaving her to handle the family business, a business that was costing innocent lives. "This has to stop," she whispered. "Indeed it does, madam." A deep voice drawled from behind her. Virginia turned to find a tall man leaning against the hitching post. Dust covered his worn denim pants and faded blue shirt. A wide-brimmed Stetson cast shadows across striking blue eyes that assessed her with unnerving intensity. A star-shaped badge glinted on his leather vest. "Deputy Reed Nolan," he introduced himself, touching the brim of his hat. "Federal Marshal's office arrived on today's stage." Virginia appraised the newcomer cautiously. "My father didn't mention hiring a federal marshal." "He didn't," Reed replied. "Governor did. After the 4th mining company robbery in as many months, seems the territory has taken an interest in your family's troubles." Sheriff Tompkins nodded grimly. "Reed's reputation precedes him, Miss Kane. They say he's tracked down more outlaws than any man west of the Mississippi." Virginia studied the marshal more carefully. Despite the trail dust, there was something quietly commanding about him. His face was all hard angles, high cheekbones, strong jaw with just enough stubble to suggest he hadn't seen proper civilization in days. But it was the eyes that caught her attention, clear, intelligent, and somehow sad. "Then I welcome your assistance, Marshal Nolan," Virginia said formally. "Though I fear the Blackwell Gang may prove challenging even for a man of your reputation." Something like amusement flickered across his face. "Challenge is what keeps life interesting, Miss Kane." Over the next week, Reed became a constant, unsettling presence in Virginia's life. He spent days examining ledgers, interviewing miners, and riding out to inspect the far reaches of the Kane silver claim. Evenings often found him sharing meals with Virginia in her father's grand home on the hill overlooking town, discussing business with a directness that both irritated and fascinated her. "The pattern is clear," Reed explained one evening as they sat in her father's study. "The Blackwells aren't just targeting random employees. They're eliminating anyone who handles your shipping schedules or payment information." Virginia frowned. "You believe someone's feeding them information about our operations?" "I know it," Reed said firmly. "These attacks are too precise to be random. Your father's operation is being sabotaged from within." "That's impossible," Virginia protested. "Many of these men have worked for my father for years." "Loyalty can be bought, Miss Kane." Reed's voice was gentle but unyielding. "And the Blackwells have plenty of silver to do the buying." Virginia rose and walked to the window, staring out at the moonlit mountains that had given her family their fortune and now seemed to be taking payment in blood. "What do you suggest we do?" she finally asked. "Spring a trap," Reed said, coming to stand beside her. "But it would require using you as bait." Virginia turned sharply. "Me? Your father's condition is worsening. Everyone knows you're now effectively running the mine." Reed's eyes were serious. The next logical target isn't another clerk or foreman, it's you, Miss Kane. The directness of his statement sent a chill through her, but Virginia lifted her chin. Then let them come. It's not that simple, Reed cautioned. We'd need to make them believe you've discovered who their informant is, that you're planning to travel to Silver City to inform the territorial governor personally. And then I catch them when they come for you. Virginia studied his face. You make it sound so straightforward, Marshal. The plan is straightforward. Executing it will be anything but. You'll get hurt, Virginia said softly, surprising herself with the concern in her voice. The Marshal's expression shifted slightly, something warming in his eyes. Then I'll heal knowing you're safe. The simple declaration hung between them, changing something fundamental in their relationship. For a moment, Virginia couldn't look away from his gaze. The trap was set 3 days later. Word was carefully leaked that Virginia had uncovered the identity of the Blackwell informant and would be traveling to Silver City with evidence. In truth, she would be traveling only as far as the old Wilkins homestead, abandoned after Indian raids 2 years prior, where Reed had positioned a contingent of trusted deputies. The morning of departure dawned clear and cool. Virginia found herself strangely calm as she packed a small valise and dressed in a practical riding outfit of deep blue, her mother's favorite color, before consumption took her when Virginia was just 12. A soft knock at her bedroom door announced Reed's arrival. He entered at her invitation, hat in hand, looking unexpectedly formal in a clean white shirt and black vest. "The coach is ready, Miss Kane," he said. "I've asked you repeatedly to call me Virginia," she reminded him, pulling on her gloves. A faint smile touched his lips. "Virginia." "The coach is ready. Are you certain this will work?" she asked, unable to keep the doubt from her voice. "No," Reed admitted frankly, "but it's our best chance to end this before more innocent people die." The honesty of his response was strangely reassuring. Virginia nodded and gathered her courage. Then let's not keep the Blackwells waiting. The journey began without incident. Virginia rode inside the coach with Reed beside her, his presence both comforting and unsettling in the confined space. 2 trusted deputies rode as outriders while Sheriff Tompkins drove the team. 5 miles outside of town, where the road narrowed between rocky outcroppings, Reed suddenly tensed. "We're being followed," he said quietly. 2 riders keeping their distance. Virginia's heart quickened. "Scouts." Reed nodded grimly. "The main force will be waiting ahead, likely at Serpent's Pass." An hour later, as they approached the treacherous stretch of road known locally as Serpent's Pass, Reed signaled for the coach to stop. "From here we separate," he told Virginia. "You'll continue with the sheriff toward the Wilkins place while I circle back with the deputies to trap them between us." Virginia caught his arm as he prepared to disembark. "Be careful, Marshal," something softened in his expression. "I gave you my word, Virginia. I don't break promises." The coach continued forward without Reed, and Virginia felt his absence like a physical thing. The sheriff maintained a grim silence as they navigated the winding road between tall rock formations. They had nearly cleared the pass when the first shot rang out. "Get down." Sheriff Tompkins shouted as he struggled to control the startled horses. Virginia dropped to the floor of the coach as bullets splintered wood around her. The coach lurched violently, then came to a jarring halt. Through the window, she could see riders surrounding them, at least 6 men, faces covered with bandanas, rifles aimed at the coach. "Come out nice and slow," a gruff voice commanded. "And maybe we'll let the sheriff live," Virginia's mind raced. Reed had anticipated an ambush, but not so soon. He and his men would still be circling back, too far to help. She remembered the small derringer her father had insisted she carry tucked now in her boot. 1 shot, maybe 2, not enough. "I'm counting to 3, Miss Kane," the outlaw called. 1. The sheriff caught her eye. "I'll try to draw their fire. You run for those rocks." He nodded toward a cluster of boulders about 20 yards away. 2. Virginia shook her head. "I won't leave you." 3. The sheriff flung open the door and fired his pistol in one fluid motion. Virginia heard a cry of pain, then the terrible sound of return fire. Sheriff Tompkins fell backward, blood blooming across his chest. No, Virginia scrambled toward him, but the sheriff's eyes were already vacant, staring at nothing. "Get the girl," someone shouted. Virginia had no choice. She grabbed her skirts and leapt from the far side of the coach, running desperately for the rocks. Bullets kicked up dust at her heels. She reached the boulders and pressed herself against cold stone, breathing hard, the derringer now clutched in her trembling hand. "Come on out, Miss Kane," called a new voice, smoother, more educated than the others. "We only want the name of your informant." "I don't know what you're talking about," Virginia called back, trying to sound braver than she felt. A chilling laugh answered her. "Your father's mine has taken enough from my family. It seems only fair that I take something precious from him in return." Virginia recognized the voice now. Maxwell Blackwell, the educated son of the man who had once claimed ownership of the silver vein that had made the Kane fortune. "Old grievances never settled. The law will find you," Virginia warned. "The law?" Blackwell laughed again. "You mean your marshal? We've been watching him for days. He's halfway to the Wilkins place by now, chasing shadows." Cold dread settled in Virginia's stomach. Had their plan been compromised from the start, the sound of approaching horses made her peer cautiously around the boulder. 4 riders were coming up the road, not from the direction of town, but from further ahead. Her heart sank. More of Blackwell's men, cutting off any chance of escape. But as the riders drew closer, Virginia saw Maxwell Blackwell's posture change. He raised his rifle. "That's not Johnson's group," he hissed to his men. "Take cover!" Gunfire erupted as Reed and his deputies charged into the ambush, taking Blackwell's men by surprise. Virginia watched in horror and hope as Reed leapt from his horse, firing with deadly accuracy while diving for cover behind the abandoned coach. The battle was swift and violent. 2 of Blackwell's men fell immediately. Another took a shot to the leg and surrendered. The remaining outlaws retreated toward the rocks where Virginia hid. She pressed herself deeper into the shadows, clutching her small derringer. Footsteps crunched on gravel nearby, then a voice, Maxwell Blackwell himself. "I know you're here, girl," he snarled. "Your marshal friend is good, I'll grant him that, but he can't save you now." Virginia heard the hammer of his pistol cock. In that moment, her fear crystallized into something harder, sharper. She thought of Sheriff Tompkins, of young Peterson, of all the lives lost to this feud. Carefully, silently, she readied her derringer. As Blackwell rounded the boulder, Virginia fired. Her shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around with a howl of pain and surprise. His gun discharged harmlessly into the ground as he stumbled backward. Before he could recover, Reed was there, pistol pressed against Blackwell's temple. "Drop it," Reed ordered, his voice cold as mountain ice. Blackwell's gun clattered to the ground. His eyes burned with hatred as they locked on Virginia. "This isn't over," he spat. "A Kane will never." Reed struck him hard with the butt of his pistol, and Blackwell crumpled unconscious to the ground. "Actually," Reed said to the unconscious man, "it is over." He turned to Virginia, his expression shifting from cold determination to concern as he quickly crossed to her side. "Are you hurt?" His hands gently gripped her shoulders, eyes searching her face. "No," Virginia managed, though her voice shook. "But Sheriff Tompkins." Reed's face tightened with grief. "I know, we found him." One of the deputies called out, announcing that the area was secure, that 3 outlaws were dead and 3 captured, including Maxwell Blackwell. "What happened to your plan?" Virginia asked. "Blackwell said you were headed to the Wilkins place." "That's what we wanted him to think," Reed explained. "I suspected our original plan might have been compromised, so we fed false information. The deputies rode openly toward the Wilkins homestead while I doubled back with trusted men." His eyes darkened. "I just didn't get back in time to save Tompkins." Virginia reached up to touch his face gently. "You saved me." Something shifted in Reed's expression, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. For a moment it seemed he might say something more, but one of the deputies approached, breaking the moment. "Marshal, we should get Miss Kane back to town. It'll be dark soon." Reed nodded, stepping back. "Of course." The ride back to Redemption Creek was solemn. Sheriff Tompkins's body was carefully wrapped and placed in the coach, while the captured outlaws were bound to their horses. Virginia rode double with Reed, her arms wrapped around his waist, face pressed against his back. She told herself it was merely for safety, but the comfort she found in his solid presence contradicted the lie. News of the shootout spread quickly through town. By the time they arrived, a crowd had gathered in the main street. Virginia endured their stares with quiet dignity, though she longed to retreat to the privacy of her home. Reed seemed to sense her discomfort and efficiently dispersed the onlookers, instructing the deputies to secure the prisoners while he personally escorted Virginia home. At her door, Virginia finally allowed the composure she'd maintained to crack slightly. "I need to tell my father about Sheriff Tompkins. They were friends for 30 years. Reed nodded gravely. "Would you like me to come with you?" The offer surprised her, but Virginia found herself nodding. "Yes, I think I would." Jacob Kane took the news with the stoic resignation of a man who had seen too much death in his 70 years. Propped against pillows in his massive 4-poster bed, his once powerful frame now diminished by illness, he listened as Reed explained the day's events. "So Maxwell Blackwell is finally caught," the old man said when Reed finished, his voice weak but satisfied. "His father would be turning in his grave." "The feud ends here, Mr. Kane," Reed assured him. "Maxwell will hang for the murders he ordered, and his remaining men will face territorial justice." Jacob's rheumy eyes shifted to his daughter. "And my Virginia showed true Kane courage, I hear." Virginia took her father's hand. "I did what was necessary." "Always have," Jacob said with a hint of pride. He turned back to Reed. "Marshal, I find myself in your debt." Reed shook his head. "I was doing my job, sir." "Nevertheless," Jacob insisted, "I would consider it an honor if you would stay on in Redemption Creek. The town will need a new sheriff now that poor Tompkins is gone." Virginia looked at Reed with sudden interest. The thought of him staying permanently in Redemption Creek stirred emotions she wasn't ready to examine. "That's a generous offer, Mr. Kane," Reed said carefully. "But I serve the Federal Marshal's office. Arrangements can be made," Jacob said with the confidence of a man accustomed to getting his way. "Think on it, at least." Later, as Virginia walked Reed to the door, an awkward silence fell between them. "Thank you," she finally said, "for everything today." Reed studied her face in the soft lamplight of the foyer. "You were very brave." "I was terrified," Virginia admitted. "Bravery isn't the absence of fear, it's action in spite of it." Reed hesitated, then added, "Your father's offer is tempting." Virginia felt her pulse quicken. "Is it? Redemption Creek seems like a town worth protecting." His gaze held hers. "With people worth protecting." "You would be welcome here," Virginia said softly. Something unspoken passed between them, a current of possibility that neither was quite ready to acknowledge. "Good night, Virginia," Reed said finally, touching the brim of his hat. "Good night, Marshal." The days following the shootout brought rapid change to Redemption Creek. Maxwell Blackwell and his surviving men were transported to the territorial capital for trial, accompanied by 2 of Reed's deputies. The town buried Sheriff Tompkins with full honors, the entire community turning out to pay respects to the man who had served them faithfully for nearly 2 decades. Through it all, Reed remained, ostensibly to ensure the transition of authority and to complete his investigation. But Virginia noticed how he had begun integrating himself into the town's daily life, taking meals at the hotel restaurant rather than alone in his room, attending Sunday services, even joining the miners for their Saturday night poker games. A week after the shootout, Virginia found Reed sitting alone on the hotel porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. "May I join you?" she asked. Reed stood quickly. "Of course." They sat in companionable silence for several minutes, watching the light fade from the sky. Virginia was acutely aware of his presence beside her, the clean scent of soap and leather, the steady rhythm of his breathing. "I've been thinking about your father's offer," Reed said finally. Virginia's heart skipped. "And?" "I've spent 10 years chasing outlaws across the territory," he said, his voice thoughtful, "moving from town to town, never staying long enough to." He trailed off. "To what?" Virginia prompted gently. Reed turned to look at her directly. "To build something permanent." The word permanent hung in the air between them, carrying weight far beyond its simple meaning. "And is that something you want?" Virginia asked. "Something permanent." Reed's gaze was steady, unflinching. "I'm beginning to think it might be." Virginia felt a flush rise to her cheeks. Redemption Creek has much to offer the right person. "Does it now?" A smile touched the corners of Reed's mouth. "It does," Virginia confirmed. "Though I should warn you that the Kane Mining Company is particular about who it associates with." Reed leaned slightly closer. "Is that so?" "Very particular," Virginia said, finding unexpected boldness. "Especially its acting director. And what might earn her approval?" Reed asked softly. Virginia considered him thoughtfully. "Honesty, courage. And perhaps the willingness to stay for reasons beyond a job offer." Reed's expression grew serious. "I've known many places, Virginia, but none that have given me reason to put down roots. Until now." The simple declaration made Virginia's heart beat faster. "Are you saying you'll accept my father's offer?" "I'm saying I'm considering it." Reed's eyes never left hers. "But there are other considerations that weigh more heavily in my decision." "Such as?" Virginia whispered, though she knew the answer. Instead of replying, Reed reached out slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, and took her hand in his. The touch was simple, yet it sent warmth spreading through her. "I've faced gunmen and outlaws without flinching," he said quietly. "Yet the thought of speaking plainly to you frightens me more than any of them." Virginia turned her hand to lace her fingers with his. "Then perhaps we're both afraid of the same thing." "And what's that?" Reed asked. "Of wanting something we might lose," Virginia answered honestly. Reed nodded slowly. "I've lost much in my life. It makes a man cautious. Too cautious, perhaps." A rueful smile touched his lips. "Perhaps." Virginia gathered her courage. "The night of the ambush, when I said you would get hurt and you said you would heal knowing I was safe, did you mean that?" "Every word," Reed affirmed without hesitation. "Why?" Virginia pressed. "You barely knew me." Reed was quiet for a long moment. "Some things don't require long acquaintance to recognize their value." The simple statement, delivered without flourish or pretense, touched something deep within Virginia. In Boston, she had been courted by men of wealth and education who spoke in elaborate compliments and poetic declarations. None had affected her as deeply as Reed's straightforward words. "I should be returning home," Virginia said reluctantly. "Father will be wondering where I am." Reed stood and offered his arm. "May I walk you?" The stroll to the Kane mansion was unhurried, their conversation shifting to lighter topics: the town's upcoming Founders' Day celebration, the promising new silver vein discovered in the eastern shaft, the arrival of new stock at the general store. Yet beneath the ordinary exchange ran a current of awareness, of possibilities neither was quite ready to name. At her door, Virginia paused. "Will I see you tomorrow?" "I'm meeting with the town council in the morning," Reed replied. "They're voting on your father's recommendation to appoint me as sheriff." "And if they approve?" Virginia asked, her voice carefully neutral. Reed studied her face in the gentle glow of the porch lantern. "Then I imagine we'll be seeing quite a bit of each other, Miss Kane." The formality was belied by the warmth in his eyes. Virginia felt a smile tugging at her lips. "I would like that, Sheriff Nolan." Reed's answering smile transformed his usually serious face. "So would I." Over the following weeks, Reed settled into his role as Redemption Creek's new sheriff with quiet efficiency. He hired 2 deputies, established regular patrols, and even managed to negotiate peace between 2 feuding merchants whose dispute over property lines had divided the town for years. Virginia watched his integration into town life with growing admiration. Where her father had commanded respect through wealth and power, Reed earned it through fairness and unwavering principle. The miners trusted him, the townspeople respected him, and even the saloon owner, notorious for his contempt of authority, spoke highly of the new sheriff. Their own relationship evolved with careful deliberation. Reed joined the Kane household for Sunday dinners, accompanied Virginia on her visits to the mine offices, and occasionally escorted her to town events. Always proper, always respectful, yet Virginia sensed the restrained passion beneath his composed exterior, recognized it because it mirrored her own. The first kiss, when it finally came, was both unexpected and inevitable. They had ridden out to inspect a section of the mining claim where boundary markers had been reportedly disturbed. The investigation complete, they paused on a high overlook that provided a breathtaking view of the valley. "My mother loved this spot," Virginia said, dismounting to stand at the edge of the cliff. "Father proposed to her here." Reed came to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "Your father chose well." Virginia glanced at him, uncertain if he meant the location or her mother. "Yes, he did." "Virginia," Reed said, her name sounding different somehow in his voice, "I've been meaning to speak with you about something important." Her heart quickened. "Yes." These past weeks in Redemption Creek have been. He seemed to search for the right word, unexpected. "How so?" Virginia asked, turning to face him fully. "I came here to do a job," Reed explained, "to catch outlaws and move on as I've always done." He met her gaze directly. "I didn't expect to find reasons to stay." "And have you?" Virginia asked softly. "Found reasons." Reed's answer was to close the distance between them, his hand gentle against her cheek as he lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss was tentative at first, a question rather than a demand. Virginia answered by stepping closer, her hands coming to rest against his chest as she returned the kiss with growing certainty. When they finally parted, Reed kept her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since the day you faced down Maxwell Blackwell without flinching." Virginia laughed softly. "I was terrified." "So was I," Reed admitted, "not of Blackwell, of losing you before I'd even had a chance to know you." Virginia's heart swelled with emotion. "And now I'm terrified of something else entirely." His voice was low, serious. "Of how much I've come to care for you, Virginia Kane." The declaration, so honest in its vulnerability, touched Virginia deeply. She raised a hand to his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "Then we're afraid of the same thing again," she whispered. "Because I find myself caring very deeply for you, Reed Nolan." The admission hung between them, changing everything. Reed's eyes darkened with emotion as he drew her close again, this time kissing her with a passion that left no doubt of his feelings. Their courtship progressed rapidly after that day. Though they maintained propriety in public, their private moments were filled with growing intimacy and candid conversations. Virginia shared her hopes for the mine's future, her desire to improve conditions for the workers and their families. Reed spoke of his childhood in Missouri, the loss of his parents to fever when he was 16, and his journey west to forge a new life. Jacob Kane observed their blossoming relationship with quiet satisfaction. Though his health continued to decline, he took obvious pleasure in witnessing his daughter's happiness. "He's a good man," Jacob told Virginia one evening as they sat together in his study. "Different from what I imagined for you, but perhaps better," Virginia smiled. "I think so too." "Not for his badge or his reputation," Jacob continued, "but for how he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching." "And how is that, father?" Virginia asked, curious. Jacob's weathered face softened. "The same way I looked at your mother for 30 years. Like you're the answer to questions he didn't even know he was asking." The territorial judge arrived in early October, bringing news that Maxwell Blackwell had been convicted and sentenced to hang. The town breathed a collective sigh of relief, sensing that a dark chapter had finally closed. That evening, Reed took Virginia for a walk along the creek that gave the town its name. The aspens were turning gold, their leaves rustling in the gentle breeze as the sunset painted the water with crimson and amber reflections. "Beautiful," Virginia murmured, gazing at the scenic vista. "Yes," Reed agreed, though his eyes were fixed on her. "Virginia, there's something I need to ask you." She turned to find him looking unusually nervous, his normally steady hands fidgeting slightly. "What is it?" she prompted gently. Reed took a deep breath, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I had this sent from Denver," he said, opening it to reveal a delicate silver ring set with a single perfect diamond. "It's not as grand as what you might have had in Boston, but it's beautiful," Virginia interrupted, her eyes filling with tears. Reed took her hand. "Virginia Kane, I came to this town hunting outlaws and found something I never expected: a home, a purpose, and most importantly, you." His voice grew husky with emotion. "I love you. Will you marry me?" Virginia's heart soared. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you, Reed Nolan." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Reed's face broke into a rare, unguarded smile that transformed his features completely. He drew her into his arms, sealing their engagement with a kiss that promised a lifetime of tomorrows. Their wedding took place on Christmas Eve in the town's small church, decorated with evergreen boughs and candles for the holiday. Jacob Kane, determined to see his daughter married, rallied enough strength to walk her down the aisle, his face glowing with pride despite his physical frailty. Virginia wore her mother's wedding gown, carefully altered by the town's seamstress, while Reed cut a handsome figure in a new black suit. The entire town turned out for the celebration that followed, spilling from the church hall into the snow-covered street where bonfires kept the winter chill at bay. Near midnight, Reed found Virginia standing alone on the church porch, gazing up at the star-filled sky. "Having second thoughts, Mrs. Nolan?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. The new name sent a thrill through Virginia. "Not one," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "I was just thinking about how differently things might have turned out if you hadn't come to Redemption Creek." Reed's arms tightened around her. "I don't like to think about that possibility." Virginia turned in his arms to face him. "Do you remember what you said to me that day when I told you would get hurt? That I'd heal knowing you were safe?" Reed recalled immediately. "Did you mean it?" She asked softly. Reed's expression grew serious. "With all my heart. I'd face any danger, bear any pain to keep you safe, Virginia. And I would do the same for you," she promised. "Though I much prefer having you whole and unharmed beside me." Reed smiled, bending to kiss her gently. "As do I, my love. As do I." Above them, a shooting star streaked across the winter sky, a brilliant flash of light against the darkness. Virginia made a silent wish for their future together, for a life filled with love and children, for many years in this town that had become truly her home. As if reading her thoughts, Reed whispered against her hair, "This is just the beginning, Virginia. We have our whole lives ahead of us." Virginia nestled closer into his embrace, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. "Our whole lives," she echoed contentedly. "I like the sound of that, Sheriff Nolan." "So do I, Mrs. Nolan," Reed replied, his voice rich with promise. "So do I."